spiritual food for thought.
Tic Toc Brain versus the Bible. Welcome back to Spiritual Food for Thought. Thank you for joining me once again. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about how the enemy is more subtle than a lot of people realize. He does things on the sly. And right now he's got time on his hands. Knows his time is short, but he still has some at the moment. And how do you get people to not read the written word of God when they're literate? How do you get them to not read the written word of God when Bibles cost what? $1.25 right now at the Dollar Tree? How do you get people when they have access to the word of God and they can read it because they're literate? How do you get them not to read the Bible? Well, of course, distractions and cares of this world are many. But also there's an erosion and a corruption of the mind going on right now like never before. A lot of times you'll hear parents say, I just want to give my children the things I didn't have growing up. Like what? ADHD? Okay. Because when you use a television, when you use a tablet, when you use a smartphone as a babysitter, okay, because you don't want to deal with your children, so you hand them those devices. And a child left to his own devices, right? And when you do that, their mind is programmed. Thank you for watching our program. And part of what they do is they program it a certain way, in a way that they can't handle concentrating on written words on a page anymore. Do you know that in videos, okay, unless this image changes every 5 seconds, the vast majority of people out there will click away. If you'll notice on this channel, and I also have a main channel where I do homesteading stuff, I don't play that game. Will I have less audience retention because of it? Absolutely. But I'm not going to sit here and change the image for you guys every 5 seconds and erode your concentration and take away from you the ability to be able to focus and add to that. I don't want to play that game. I want you not just to be able to be a Bible believer, but as you saw in the last video, a Bible reader. And unfortunately, I think we're reaching the day and age where people just simply will not have the even just willpower to be able to concentrate that long without all the extra added stimuli. And I don't think it's just random. I don't think it's arbitrary. I think it's a direct, focused, thought out at least by the enemy, plan to corrupt your concentration. I was recently out at a campground with my family, and I noticed that a couple of the older men around that campground were reading books, and I complimented them. I said, you know what, that's going to be a lost art in 20 years. One of them says it's not going to take that long, and I'm like, you're right. You're right. So what do? The one thing I would definitely recommend that any parent or grandparent out there does would to try to cultivate a love of reading in your children. One of the ways to do that is to read to them. Another way is to keep them unplugged as much as is reasonable, right? You may not be able to avoid things all the time. I went out to eat once with my family, and we were the only family in the restaurant, and there was nothing but walls of screens around us. So I went up and asked, could we possibly turn that off? They checked with the manager. Couldn't turn the televisions off, even though we were the only ones there. A lot of times you find, and if they're on every wall, where do I face my children, right? Well, I teach them to exercise their willpower, try not to get distracted, just focus on enjoying the meal together as a family. But even that, relationships. I'm going to kind of segue, just take a short rabbit trail. But think about relationships, besides just being able to concentrate on the written word of God. Do you see how our current rate of stimuli, our current ever-changing images and bells and whistles and loud noises and flashing screens and different colors, how it's deteriorating relationships? How many times have you guys seen a family sitting down for dinner and everyone's on their smartphone? How many times have you seen a car pass you and everyone's on their smartphone? Sometimes even the driver, right? They don't talk much anymore. Why? Because it's not stimulating enough. It's looking face to face with somebody like this, and so many people, these videos are not palatable for a lot of people to sit there and listen to one person talk, not have a constant changing images. It's deteriorating people's relationships too, not just their relationship with God. So I would highly recommend that you cultivate a love of reading in your children or grandchildren if you're able to. Number one, read to them when you're able. Number two, reduce the stimuli. I know the TV was often on in my parents' house, but if company came over, the first thing my mom would do was shut off the television. Why? It was time to build a relationship, work on that relationship, not stand there or sit there together watching television. I know some people, you show up to visit them, they sit down in front of the screen of the TV the whole time. So you can kind of sit next to them and watch with them, or nothing, because they don't offer you anything else. They just want to watch that screen. We have to be careful with this. The third way is once they get able to read, or even before, have them have books of their own. One thing I like to do, a lot of times if you have books displayed like this, they're not as appealing for a child. So a lot of our children's bookshelves that we've made ourselves, we make them so it's this way, so they're able to look and see the book this way, because that's, a little more appealing for them to see something like that. These are actually some of the books we've made ourselves. This one's still a work in progress. It's almost done. But we're also trying to, make books for children. Cool thing about these, my daughter actually took all the pictures for them. But this is just a simple book. It's a fact-filled fiction book about opossums. And the point is that it's supposed to, educate while they learn. Like I said, my daughter took all the pictures. There's some pretty cool ones in here. We just made this fiction tale with just all sorts of information so they could learn about one of the creatures that God created, to be exposed to something about animals without evolution mentioned constantly. In millions and billions of years mentioned constantly. And, the first one we did for our children's book was just a story my dad would tell the children. He decided to write it down so that way it would exist longer. And we decided to take that and turn that into a book. I thought, you know what? We have the capability. It was a book about an armadillo, and we've got armadillos around here. So I had my daughter take all the pictures. My dad wrote it. I put it together. It took 3 generations of our family to put out this children's book, right? This one too. Nice and simple, and it's, black and white photos. Not very colorful, not very stimulating. Some words on every page to read pretty much. We don't just believe it, right? We're also actively at work trying to do that. So read to your children, reduce stimuli, get them books to read, or before they can read, teach them it's time to go sit down on the couch, pick out a book. Like I said, we like to display them where they can look at the covers. We also like to make books with them, get them involved in it. That's something we're able to do, so we do. But if they have a palate for reading, if they're able to sit down and concentrate at words or pictures on a page that aren't flashing and moving and doing all these things, then as they grow, they're going to be able to read the Word of God. I know one of my children this year is in, I forget. My second oldest daughter, I think she's somewhere at least in Kings. And I know my oldest daughter, I think, is already in Proverbs or Psalms, and reading through the entire Bible. Our oldest daughter has already read the whole thing once. She's 13 right now. She's already read the entire Bible for herself. And I think that's important. My children, we're currently expecting number 9, but I know at least the oldest 5 or 6, the oldest 6, have heard the entirety of the Word of God from my lips. In fact, the oldest 7, because our little guy, second youngest, is 3. So I know he's heard the entire thing, because normally every year or 2, it seems, I'm able to make it through reading the entire Bible to my family. So the top 7 of my children have already heard it from my lips, some of them multiple times. We get to take and set an example. And if my children see me reading, and they hear me reading to them, and we teach them how to read and write, and we teach them that sitting down with a book is okay, and we reduce that high frequency stimuli, constantly changing stuff to rot away their brain. A lot of people these days, they say they have Tic Toc Brain. They're not going to be able to do it. A lot of them will absolutely never read the entire Bible, even if they wanted to, because their concentration and their focus will be completely shot because they got programmed to need all that other stimuli. Having a one-on-one conversation, very difficult for people. Making it through a dinner without looking at the phone, very difficult for people. If you see society being eroded in this way, if you see the way that people are being corrupted in this way, and you do not want your children or grandchildren to eventually wind up there, you need to take steps right now, at the moment, in the present. And as I've said before, maybe not on this channel, but my goal is to live in the present in such a way that when I get to the future, I don't regret my past. That's a conscious effort, an intentional way of living that you must live right now. Because otherwise, in the future, you're going to regret your past. We have an opportunity to cultivate that next generation, to sow into their lives, and we're going to reap what we sow. I get the convenience of little children pestering or, being a constant distraction or a constant need for your attention. And I know how easy it is to be tempted just to give them a show to watch. Okay, and even look, sometimes the stuff that passes for Christian stuff, you really think VeggieTales glorifies God overall? Mostly, it's folly, which is bound up in the heart of a child and should be removed from it. Just because somebody somewhere at some time said it was okay doesn't mean that it is. I'd be very cautious on what you allow your children to watch for sure, but then also just watching stuff like that in general. Kind of that underarching side effect, or potentially their actual goal, of corrupting the focus and the mental capability of people to be able to do something like read a book. If you guys are interested in checking these out, I'll link the Amazon link to a couple different ones of the books we put out. A couple of children's ones. I'll link some other ones too. They'll be in the video description and the pinned comment, but I would highly recommend getting some books. I would highly recommend, just like with shows, preview them. Make sure the books are acceptable for your children, right? Before you just go ahead and hand them to them. A lot of ideas and different things that you may not want to be anywhere near your precious little ones. But at some point, cultivate as much as you can that love of reading in them. So that way they're able to not just be a Bible believer who doesn't know what's in the Bible, but a Bible believer who's read it themselves. We can do it in our generation, and we're stewards of these souls. It's required in stewards that one be found faithful. So just be faithful with these precious little ones that God has entrusted into your care. I hope that makes sense. Be blessed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.